everybody, whether you're on the East Coast, West Coast, or around the world. This is Football Talk. Welcome to Season 2. So we're looking at down the pipe of preseason. OTAs are done, and we got preseason workouts coming. Excited to have football back. This is the last month to not have the NFL in our lives until next year. So excited for some Seahawks football. Obviously, it's a Blue Friday. It's beautiful here in Seattle. It's going to be about 75 degrees and sunny. And for you around the world, that's going to be somewhere around 25, 27 degrees. It might get up to 80 today. So in any event, we have some things to talk about with the Seahawks. We haven't been on. We've taken a little break with this show just because, it's off season, not a lot going on. And but we're gearing up for preseason. There's a lot to talk about, especially because with 92 guys on the roster, they got roster cuts that come real quick through the preseason. And, some of those guys are obviously going to be moving on from the Hawks, maybe moving on from the league. They'll start looking at things like the XFL, USFL, stuff like that. So it's exciting to have football back. So grab your coffee and let's talk some Seahawks. This show is brought to you by El Cajon. It's a Peruvian restaurant down there in Pike Place Market. Awesome place. If you go there anytime Wednesday through Sunday from 4 to 9 p.m., mention the Hawk Talk show and get 20% off your bill. Definitely go down, say hi to Linda. Great spot, great food. Check it out. So other than that, let's get rolling. One of the things that I've seen some talk about, and of course I got asked about, if the Seahawks giving away Russell Wilson's number 3 number was a big deal. A cornerback is using it at the moment. Now you got to remember, giving away a number, unless it's retired, really doesn't matter. And Seattle has a history of not retiring a ton of numbers. So there's only 5 numbers that are retired anyway. And one of them is the number 12 that was given away to the fans back in, I think it was 82, something like that. So it's not as big of a deal as a lot of these talk shows are making it sound like. They're saying that Seattle is bitter. And, even if there was some bitterness to it, at the end of the day, Wilson, although he's going to go down as the best Seahawk quarterback that they've had, he did force his way out. That's going to rub some people the wrong way, no matter how you cut it. But just to give you an idea of the 5 numbers that have been given away, only one of them, I'm obviously not including the 12, but only one of them wasn't given away to someone else before it ultimately got retired. And all of these have been subsequently retired after they get into the Hall of Fame, right? So like 96, Cortez Kennedy, right? His number was given away twice before it was retired. Largent, obviously his was a special situation. It was given away to Jerry Rice. So fair enough. But then even Kenny Easley, his was given away. So the only number that wasn't given away after a player left the team, but before they entered the Hall of Fame was Big Walter Jones. And so, I mean, them giving the number away really doesn't matter. Plus, when you look at it realistically, that player's probably not making the squad this year. We have a lot of other cornerback talent that's good. So that number probably isn't going to be a game day roster number anyway. But, again, until they actually retire it, them giving away a number to somebody is really a non-issue. I think that's just because they started talking about it because it's a slow, football news season at this point, and they need something to talk about. So they're just trying to drum up some drama. But at the end of the day, it's just a number. And there's 92 guys on the roster. There's only so many numbers to choose from. I mean, you're not going to be out there with multiple guys with the same number. At least you try to avoid it. And of course, the NFL doesn't have triple numbers on any jerseys yet. So, when you have that many guys out there, everyone has to wear a number. So I think they're making a story out of nothing, but that's kind of my take on it. Until it's retired, it really doesn't matter. All right, so let's get into some just kind of where I think the Hawks are headed, and I think they're headed into another wild card season. I do think they're going to be better than they were last year as far as a complete team. Most of the season they were a top 5 scoring offense until the end where they started to get some injuries, but that last ranked defense for most of the season, and I think they wrapped up at either 29th or 30th overall. That's tough when you're giving up almost 200 yards a game. You can't stop anything in the middle of the field. The fact that they made it to the playoffs, it was awesome because that defense was horrendous. Like, there were nice elements. Obviously, the secondary played out of their mind, sort of because they had to. But bringing in the rookie in Tariq Woolen and having the multiple Pro Bowl safety in Diggs back there. Obviously that gave them a nice safety net, considering the linebacking core and the defensive line were really lacking throughout the season. So this offseason, free agency, they get in and they bring in, they bring back Bobby Wagner. Obviously a huge lift to that linebacking core. They also brought in another linebacker, re-signed our best linebacker, brought in a couple of defensive linemen and a center, right? So they in free agency, where Seattle has a real history of not doing a lot. Yeah, generally, if you're a Hawks fan and you're watching free agency, you're just hoping they do something, not even something splashy, big name or anything like that. Just get anything that is helpful. And typically they're not really moving around a ton. But they pick up a second in that was weird. Even though they keep getting dinged on rankings as far as what their draft was, it was a great pickup because they haven't had a starting running back make it through the season without hitting IR since 2014. And when you think about the fact that it's 2023, that's a lot of seasons to not have your starting running back make it through the season. So them picking up a running back made complete sense. And then they get a couple of interior linemen and, and getting a center and a guard, which is really great because if you were watching the way I was last year, there was so many times that they just couldn't open rushing lanes for Walker to run through. And he was starting to break tackles behind the line of scrimmage a lot of times. So it's encouraging to see that they were addressing all of the things that they really needed to do. Obviously in the draft, they also brought in a couple more defensive linemen. So that defense is going to be significantly better than it was last year. Now, I don't think it's going to be Legion of Boom or, top 5 or anything like that. Like, I think it's going to go from the 30th ranked defense to like 14th, 15th, right on, right, like middle of the league kind of thing. But if the offense can be as productive as they were last year, and there's really nothing to see why they wouldn't be, right? Gino's coming back. Everything that he showed us from last season is very duplicatable stuff. He wasn't making insane athletic plays to win games, right? Like, he was methodical, took care of the ball, was willing to throw it away when it didn't matter. Check downs. I mean, and then even though we lost Goodwin, who was a great, kind of counterpart for Lockett and DK. Now you have JSN, and he's going to be a great slot receiver. I think he ultimately pulls a couple of receptions away from DK. So if you're a fantasy player, having 3 really good guys on the same team, it's tough to get everybody all their touches, especially since they have two really capable backs and an upgraded offensive line. I think that all of those receiving numbers probably take a little bit of a hit. I think the only receiver that's probably going to be over 1,000 yards this year will be Lockett, just because JSN is going to get some of DK's receptions, I think. DK is still going to have a good year, right? He's still going to be probably 900 yards, something like that. And then I would imagine JSN will be somewhere around, 600-700 yards maybe. But excuse me. So yeah, no, I think that I think if they can keep that offensive production, having that upgrade in the defense on the linebacking core and defensive line, and of course, you get Jamal Adams back also, maybe, right? Like hopefully he can stay healthy. We haven't seen him be able to do it, but hopefully he can. But again, if they can be a middle of the road defense, then all of a sudden this team is very scary because not everybody is scoring every time they touch the ball. So you don't have the, 90-point track meet with Detroit. So hopefully if they can get a couple of stops, then if, you have Geno make a mistake, it's not detrimental to the game. It's something that you can overcome. These are all things that I'm kind of looking for going into this season. It's funny because even with those upgrades, PFF has the Seattle offensive line ranked 30th, which seems crazy to me because the two tackles that we had from last year were both home runs. And then you have a veteran center, and then you also have a rookie center and a rookie guard that are, highly ranked guys. How they think this offensive line isn't going to be better from last season is kind of a head scratcher to me, but it's PFF and they get a lot of things wrong. So, at the end of the day, I don't put a lot of stock in it, but it is always interesting to see where it is they think it's going to be. But then on the other hand, PFF has the Seattle receiving core as a top 5 receiving trio, and they're only behind the Bengals, Philly, the Dolphins, and the Niners. So it's, the offense looks really promising. The defense does require some speculation on where they're going to be, but I really don't think they're going to be bottom of the league again. I say all of that to say this, though. Where I see this season for the Seahawks is they're still a wild card team. The Niners are still the best roster in our division. I know they don't have their quarterback worked out, but until Christian McCaffrey started taking snaps, they were winning games, and it didn't matter who was under center. So if they can keep just a quarterback on the field and they don't have to defer to having a running back taking snaps, I think that team is probably going to be fine. I think the Hawks probably end up as a 10-win team. So even though they're going to be significantly better in areas where they were real weak last year, the schedule is much harder than it was last year. Now, last year they had to play the NFC South, which was a dumpster fire of a division. Weirdly, they lost all those games, but still should have been easier games. This time around, they have Dallas and Philly, and I mean, they have a significantly tougher schedule. So although the team will be better, I think in actual wins, it's probably only one more win going as a wild card. But, if the New York Giants have ever shown us anything, all you got to do is win 4 games at the end of the year, right? So if you can get hot at the right time, have a couple of things lucky that go your way, you can still come away with a ring. And, so I wouldn't count this team out. It's going to be a fun watch for sure. NFL.com actually has Geno as a dark horse MVP candidate. And some people are picking the Hawks as a dark horse for the Super Bowl. Now, I don't know that the dark horse for the MVP makes a lot of sense, just because I think our rushing yardage is probably going to be higher than it was last year. So I don't think he's going to be just throwing the rock around all the time. I mean, he ended up doing that a lot last year just because we were either playing from behind or, then Kenneth Walker got hurt. And so then it was sort of a, hodgepodge of who was back there. And so they started passing the ball a lot more. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to really lean back into this rushing game. And, that way you can dominate the clock and really dictate what other teams can and can't do. But then you have all these weapons. So if they do start to stop the run, you have plenty of places to throw the ball. I mean, we didn't even talk about our tight ends we have a solid tight end group as well. So this offense is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Let's see one of the questions I got asked is the future of the team when it comes to, when they try to sell it, when Pete and John, if they're going to come back after their contracts are up here in 2 years. And so I think those are actually really kind of tied closely together. And why I say that is I think Pete probably retires after this one. And Schneider was actually looking at other teams before he signed this last contract. So I think Schneider probably moves on and Pete probably retires. And originally I thought that it was going to be new coach, new GM, and then get them established, have a relatively solid team, and then Jody Allen would ultimately try and move on from the Seahawks and find a good suitor. But now, because of how much of a dumpster fire the Broncos situation was, the Waltons buy the Broncos, they come in, they have an inexperienced coach, they have a huge contract to a quarterback that looked out of his depth all season. They came in thinking they were going to get a winning team. They had a top 5 defense. I mean, they had a lot of pieces. I wasn't as high on the Broncos as a lot of sports media was talking about they're a quarterback away. I don't think that was the case, but they were certainly worse than they should have been. So I look at it as, because of how bad the Broncos were, there's a real chance that if a new ownership group is looking to buy, they may want to have and Gino's contract comes up then. Pete and John's both come up then. So that's going to be an interesting development, because you're going to have a team that, if a new ownership group really wants to have kind of overall control of how the team is built, that's really the time to do it, because it also kind of lends itself to all the free agent moves. It looks more like they are interested in trying to win right now than building for the future. So they're doing things with this team that make it look like they probably, these next 2 years are it. And so if that's the case, then, it makes a lot of sense. They were so active in free agency. Obviously they really hit on last year's draft. They look, as long as these guys look good on the field, they really look like they probably hit mostly home runs on this draft. Also, I'm going to actually try and get to a couple of the practice days. I know I can't record from there, but I can definitely take some pics and talk to some people. And so I'm going to try and get in on some of the practices down there at VMAC. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that all of a sudden that might move the timeline up for when Jody Allen wants to sell the Seahawks, and only because the Broncos looked so bad after that sale, having the previous owner bring in the quarterback and the coach. Now, obviously nobody knew that Wilson was going to have that bad of a season. And everybody thought that Hackett was going to be, I mean, better than he was. Like you expected some, some rookie head coach mistakes. Especially early in the year, you expected some gaffes to happen, and you can overlook those things. But when it seemed to just continue on throughout the season, that's where it became really troubling. And then you had Wilson, who kind of had some diva-ish things going on. So I do think that Sean Payton going into that team, kind of humbling Wilson a bit. He looks like he's gotten in better shape than he was towards the end of his tenure here in Seattle, which was some of the reason why he was less elusive towards the end of his, tenure here. Obviously he's older too, so he's probably not quite as fast, but more than anything, it was he bulked up a little bit, and rightfully so. He was getting absolutely smashed behind our offensive line that was really bad, and having a little more, bulk to him made some of those hits a little easier to absorb. The downside is it made it harder for him to get away from him. Still had plenty of straight line speed, but his just kind of side to side elusiveness had dropped off for sure. So I would expect that Wilson has a bounce back season, but again, I think because of that whole situation there, a new owner may want to come in where depending on how active the owner wants to be. But if the new owner coming in, they may want to be able to hand select their quarterback, their coach, their GM, and then really kind of mold the franchise in the way that they want to go, as opposed to the way that it's been done in the past, where they've picked up an assembled team and then over the next, 4 or 5 years, start moving pieces around to fit the things they like. So, you can kind of thank the Broncos for potentially changing the way people purchase teams. I do think that the Seahawks are probably going to have the best secondary in the league. Obviously, you got Tariq Woolen, who had a great rookie season, was tied for the most interceptions last year. You got a 3-time Pro Bowler and Diggs. They brought in another solid safety from the Jets. And then, of course, you got Witherspoon coming in for the other side. And that's if he wins that spot. He may end up being a nickel corner, which would be, amazing, because you still have Jackson, who really played awesome last season. So now you have this kind of abundance of riches in this secondary where you almost you have enough guys that you won't be able to get them all on the field. So because you still have to have Jamal Adams somewhere out there, right? Dude is a freak athlete and he's listed as a safety, so you got to figure out where he's going to be in the mix of things. So all of a sudden you got 3 good safeties, you got 3 or 4 good corners. This secondary looks to be a really stingy, really stingy backfield. And then you also look at, because of how good this linebacking core and, I wouldn't say how good, but how much improved this linebacking core and defensive line should be, they should be able to get back to that, ball hawk. Seattle turnovers has been a thing for years, right? Like the plus minus on turnovers, they generally are in the plus. And so with the upgrades that they've done to the linebacking core, the defensive line, you're going to get some more quarterback hurries and some off-target throws that can become easier interceptions, just because those weren't a thing last year. There was really no semblance of pass rush last year. And with the linebacking core the way that it was, if it was a seam route or a crossing, or, a lot of times some of those linebackers were coming up to help on the D line. So if a running back got through that, the middle of the field was wide open. So I think that because of the upgrades in the front 7, they're going to be able to add a little bit of pressure in a way that they weren't last year, and they'll be able to get more turnovers. Even though, I mean, they were good on turnovers last year anyway, but I think that there will be a little bit better opportunities for our secondary to, come up with some passes, just because these quarterbacks aren't going to be able to hang out back there. There were a couple of times that quarterbacks had, 4 or 5 seconds, and I don't care what quarterback it is. If you have that long to find a guy, someone's going to get open, because you can be the most athletic DB in the league. You're not following a receiver for 4 or 5 seconds. You can't do it. They know where you're going. They know where they're going, I should say. And, it's just too long to stick with somebody that has free reign to run around. So let's see, got a couple of questions here. So I want to make sure I get, so one of the questions I got is what I think of the new kickoff rule. It's horrible. The new kickoff rule is just, it's bad in every way I can think of it. One, how many games, when you look back through, all the games you watch, have a deciding moment happen on the kickoff? So prime example, when the Hawks played Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl, right? Obviously the first half was all Hawks. But the thing is you come out in the second half, it's Peyton Manning. It's the highest scoring offense in league history, right? So that even though you're up big, the game isn't over. So then we're receiving the kickoff, and Percy Harvin takes it to the house. Now, Percy Harvin wasn't a huge asset for the Hawks overall, but this one play completely destroyed the morale of that Broncos team. Because if you go back and watch it, the Broncos were coming out amped up. You could see they were not out of that game. They're like, we got this. We're going to get back. It's going to be fine. We can score at will. They're going to, whatever, right? And then soon as Harvin ran that back, you watched half of their players just, their faces were completely dejected. Half of them sat down on the bench. You knew at that point right there, the game was over. So without elements like that, or, there's also tons of them where there's a big run back that sets up a game-winning touchdown. Plus, if you run into a situation where you've essentially eliminated the kicking game, which is, really the path they're headed on, you miss out on the Percy Harvins, the Devin Hesters, Leon Washingtons of the world, because they got really noticed in the league because of Buda Baker. In fact, they get their notoriety by starting in those, special teams areas. So if you're eliminating the special teams, some of those guys don't make it. Cause I mean, when you look at Devin Hester, was he used in the offense? Yeah, but not a lot. Like, his main thing was, he is our return specialist. He's our guy. So for anything to be, I think it was behind the 20, anything that's a fair catch on a kickoff is, comes out to the 25, unless it's fair caught, in front of it. And then obviously it's wherever it is. But that seems insane to me, because that means anything for the last, 30 yards of the field, it comes out to the 25. Like, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of where that's headed. The only saving grace about that rule is it's a temporary rule that's being tried out for this season. I'm really surprised they pushed it through, because it sounded like everybody in-house also didn't like it when it came to team owners and, GMs and management and stuff. Didn't sound like anybody particularly liked where that rule was headed. So I do like that it's going to be a 1-year trial, and I hope it goes away, especially since it was like a difference of safety of like 8% or something. So for you to completely get rid of an element of the game, potentially get rid of incredibly talented players for an 8% difference in injuries. I mean, 8% is one of those, like, it's like a hit, right? Like it'd be through the course of a season. It might be like one guy gets injured, or two guys get injured. I feel like more people probably get injured because of bad playing surfaces than what that would save. So maybe instead of getting rid of the kickoff, maybe we fix, I don't know, the Commander's field, or, you know, any number of the fields that people routinely tear ACLs on. So I don't know. I'm not a fan. That one is kind of a sore spot for me, because I mean, the biggest thing about football is you got three faces of the game, right? You got offense, you got defense, you got special teams. They need to stop getting rid of special teams. There are so many games that are decided because of special teams. They really need to just stop messing with that. I think they've made it as safe as it can be. At the end of the day, it's a contact sport. People are going to get hurt. Things happen. So yeah, I don't know. That one, I don't like that rule. We'll put it that way. Another question I got asked was what do I think of the ESPN firings? So that's interesting. Like some of them, I guess, make sense, because you're getting rid of talent that, you know, maybe the ratings of the shows that they're on aren't high enough to justify their wage. Like that, I mean, fair enough, right? Like they're trying to bring it into kind of a break even point, at least. Because one thing that has been interesting about the kind of evolution of the sports TV, you know, commentating type thing is ESPN was obviously a juggernaut, and it still is, but it was a juggernaut. It had, I want to say it was 100 million cable subscribers to the ESPN package. And that has dropped to 75 million. Now, obviously that's still a huge number, but losing 25% of your revenue is massive for anybody. So at some point, you know, if you're any company and your revenue drops by 25%, you got to cut, you know, all over the place. And obviously some of what they called the front facing talent, some of it would have had to go. Now, who all they got rid of didn't make sense to me. So you get rid of a Jalen Rose, but you keep a Kendrick Perkins. That was kind of weird. Getting rid of Van Gundy was a real surprise to me. You know, I liked the fact that he really kind of said what was on his mind, instead of just like falling in line with whatever, you know, politically correct thing is to say. Like, I like that he was never disrespectful to the NBA, but he would definitely like call out, especially like the refs allowing so many just flopping type fouls. And maybe I just appreciated that, because similar to soccer, like it's why I can't watch soccer, is that the flopping, it murders my soul. Like if somebody flicks your ear and now you're rolling on the ground, I immediately want to switch the channel. Like man, that's a topic for a different day though. And all of you soccer fans, you can hate on me all you want, but you know, I want to be able to see you take a hit. I would actually much rather watch women's soccer, because I've seen those ladies absolutely get rocked, come up bleeding and still playing. And then I've literally watched in men's soccer, someone flick someone's ear and then he rolled for 10 yards on the field. So there's a very real difference in the leagues there. But yeah, but no, the ESPN firings is very interesting. I know that the ESPN app is actually losing, ESPN Plus, I should say, is losing money. So that hasn't been a moneymaker for them. And I know that all of these different streaming services is really hurting, you know, companies like ESPN, because now, you know, Paramount has theirs and Disney has theirs. And I know Disney is their parent company, but they have Disney Plus and ESPN Plus, and they're not the same thing. you know, I think just about every major network has its own streaming service at this point. Plus you have Netflix and Amazon and, you know, whatever. And so people are starting to have to pick which streaming devices or streaming services they want, because they're still getting their, so their cable packages, right? So you have a couple $100 in whatever cable package you got. And then when you figure your streaming services are, I don't know what, they're usually 15, $20 a piece, right? So at some point, you got to make, you know, your own fiscal decision on, okay, well, I don't watch enough on this particular app to justify another $20 a month, right? Because everything is that 15, 20, like, you know, it gets, I think Amazon Prime now it switched from an annual fee to, $15 a month, something like that. So at some point you're looking at all these streaming fees and you're like, okay, well, you know, I like a show on this. So maybe I just forego that show and save myself, a few $100s a year. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know that they have an easy out. Getting rid of some of the talent they did, I do think hurts their brand. Bringing in Pat McAfee probably helps, right? I mean, he was absolutely killing it with his podcast. So for him to make that switch, I am sure that that's going to draw some people to ESPN. It's going to be interesting to see how his show changes, because if it's on the, if it's on the main network, obviously they have some FCC regulations, and the rate that they drop F-bombs on their show, obviously not great for network TV. I would imagine that it's going to be on ESPN Plus, but then there's another streaming type thing. So maybe it'll help move the needle on their streaming service to move it out of the red. And even if it's not into the black, even if it's just breaking even, Disney would probably see that as a win. And then there's speculation that they could be going after, Shannon Sharpe, because after his breakup with Skip, who knows where he's going to go. He might move into that spot being, on DraftKings with Pat McAfee moving on. ESPN certainly would be interested, just because over the last 7 years that he's been with Skip, he's really built his own following, built a name. Not that he didn't have one, but in the broadcasting world is what I'm saying. So that's going to be an interesting development to watch, is to see if they can go get Shannon Sharpe as well. I think that would help them. I know that Stephen A. Smith had talked about having him on his show, a day a week or whatever, since Stephen A. changed the way his platform was. He doesn't have like a every week, you're, an everyday same guy across the desk. And I would imagine that it's probably going to be where Skip ends up going, just because Stephen A's show does have a lot of success with that platform. That was a situation that is very interesting to watch too, because now Undisputed is kind of, well, I mean, it's off the air for another 4 or 6 weeks, something like that. So that's kind of an unprecedented thing for Skip Bayless. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot going on in the sports media. Certainly with a lot of these guys having their own podcasts, all of these streaming services hurting each other's brand is actually helping all of us that want to aspire to do podcasts. So it's driving people to platforms like here on YouTube or, Spotify video. And of course, there's the audio podcasts as well. But I mean, just the video streaming end of it, it's really pushing people to some of these platforms that you don't necessarily have to pay for. Obviously, you can pay for the YouTube TV or, whatever it is. But yeah, I don't know. I think the sports media world is really kind of taking a shift. And for all of us that have wanted to get into it, I think it's given us an avenue to pursue that in a way that, you kind of weren't able to before. And, before you either had to go to specifically to school for that, or you had to be a notable enough professional player to make that jump. And then you had to be charismatic enough to be able to stay. And so at this point, does it take the top pay out of it? I mean, maybe a little bit, but it allows more people to start. Obviously, there's a lot of competing viewership because so many people can start at this point. So that's its own battle. But yeah, I think that for all of us that wanted to get in, some of the struggles of the main sports media is probably helpful for us getting going. It may take the top pay out of the scenario, but for a lot of us, that wasn't really in the cards anyway, because we were in a position where we weren't even able to get a crumb of a piece. So it's, I think as crazy as it seems with how many people they laid off, it's probably helping some of us smaller guys get into the field that we want to be in. So that's going to wrap us up for today. I appreciate you guys coming in, having some coffee with me this morning, talking some Seahawks. I'm definitely going to try and get out to the spring training camp at least a few of the days. So hopefully I see some of you guys out there. Be sure to like and subscribe. And of course, go check out El Cajon, again, down at Pike Place. It's Peruvian food. Wednesday through Sunday, 4 to 9. Mention this show and get 20% off your bill. Other than that, hope you guys enjoy your weekend, and I will see you next week. Take it easy, guys.